More to Marketing.
Welcome to More to Marketing, the podcast that explores marketing, product, and everything business. I'm your host, Susan Walsh, and today we're going to be talking about how sustainable practices and ethical design is achievable and how. I am actually super thrilled today because I have a special guest who lives and breathes this and has been bringing it to the world, and that's Jeff Gardner. Now, Jeff is a visionary designer and he's also the founder of his own company called Prophetic. Now, the great thing about this is he is actually a pioneer in sustainable and eco-friendly fashion brand. Now, born in Franklin, Tennessee and raised on a horse farm, I'm very jealous. Jeff's connection to nature has deeply influenced his artistic vision. Now, his brand itself and his fashion label, it's not just a movement. I want to really stress that it's not a movement. It is a transformation. He is transforming the fashion industry with sustainable practices and ethical design. Now, Jeff's journey began early. He had a passion for design that led him to work with some really known artists. I'm sure you guys have heard of Barry Manilow, Donna Summer. I've heard of them very clearly as well. But when he founded Prophetic, what he actually did was he wanted to bring in the ethical part, but also with the luxury. So pairing the two together so they can actually be achieved. And he's been able to showcase this around the world in major fashion shows and fashion weeks. And some of the celebrities he's actually had the ability to work with are Miley Cyrus, Taylor Swift, and Sheryl Crow, just to name three. There are many, many more. He is also an Emmy-winning filmmaker, and he's actually had the documentaries recognized for sustainable fashion. And we're going to talk about one of them today as well, which has just been released. His work continues to inspire a new generation of designers and consumers alike, really challenging that traditional notion of luxury and style. So I'd love to welcome Jeff and to hear more from Jeff. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for that presentation. Wow. When I think about it, when you do your passion, I feel like I've been only doing this a couple of years, but when you read that off, I'm like, wow, I'm old.
Well, you've definitely always had that true passion for sustainability throughout your whole life, and you've just been able to find that niche that you can focus on and bring it to life.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was born out of necessity, I say, because when I got into fashion, I was learning very quickly how dirty the industry was and its production, manufacturing. And I was like, wow, I gotta figure out a different solution because I love design and I love making things, and I couldn't ethically do it knowing the toxicity that was in it, and I'd be putting on people's bodies and the environment through the manufacturing. Because I was, like you said, I was raised on a horse farm, and like everything is connected. So.
And that's one of the things I've loved about coming across you and seeing everything that you've been doing, that it's all authentic and it really is from that place of love to be able to improve an industry that isn't regulated. And that's one thing that you really opened my eyes to as well about what's going on out there, because I don't think many people are aware.
Yeah, it's a weird disconnect that we feel like whatever's on the shelf in the store, somebody checked it out and approved it. But the fact is, nobody's even looked at it. It's really self-regulated by the manufacturer. And a lot of times they don't even know what's in it because a chemist is making it in a laboratory, that fabric, right? That textile. So there's a lot of disconnects. And so it's passed through the daisy chain of production, and it comes out at the end, and we haven't done the studies. And so that's what I'm bringing light to, because in my family, in my history of life, I've lost a lot, and I know the impacts of these chemicals on the body. And I was like, wow, we don't need to live in the dark anymore. We really need this to come to light so that everyone can decide for themselves. I'm a believer in free will and free choice. And right now we're in the dark, and these toxins aren't disclosed to us, and it's not fair. They at least need to be on the labels. So that's what we're striving for in this film. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And if anyone's wondering what the film is called, it's Let Them Be Naked. It's literally just come out right now. So I'll make sure that I include the URL in the show notes so everyone can find out where they can watch it. But I
It's
want to,
funny. My producer's like, "Is that a working title?" I'm like, "No, that's it." Because I have to tell everyone it's better to be nude than dressed in synthetics. But it's funny. We're getting pushback by the I guess the AI internet thing that they're capturing on that word naked, and
yeah.
they're like, I'm like, it's so funny. It's like there's always, we're finding antagonism in all sorts of the places. But yeah,
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the ignorance of not understanding what the purpose of the documentary is about and just judging it by that title. It wasn't done for shock and awe like many people do with clickbait. It was
right.
because the ethos behind it is true, and that's what you're showing in the documentary.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to strip down back to our natural selves and then rebuild. Like, because majority of people watch it and they go home from the film festivals and they're like, look in their closets for the first time ever, look at the tags and see what their clothes are made of. And majority of people that gave us feedback, about 10% of their wardrobe is natural fibers, and they're just in awe and shock. So it's almost like you have to rebuild your wardrobe if you want to follow, this idea of wearing natural, but yeah, it's very interesting.
No, it's definitely opened up my eyes, and I'm probably in that same boat of only 10% would be natural. And that's where my future choices would be changed. I still remember a couple of years ago, I really wanted a nice jumper. I won't name the TV show that was on it. I just thought, oh, this would be a cool jumper to wear at winter. It looks nice and warm. So I bought
Sure.
it online. And I still remember today the smell it had when I opened it from the plastic bag of just
Yeah.
chemical. And I'm being very honest, it went straight in the bin
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
smelt that chemical and I went, this doesn't smell like what clothes should smell like. And I put
Yeah.
it straight in the bin. But and then learning more about yourself, what you've been doing, even watching I highly recommend people to search Jeff as well. You'll be able to see some of the great videos. One of them I particularly watched was him actually showing people how to dye their own clothing, not in detail, but at least showing it. And
Yeah.
it's just beautiful to walk out there and I'm probably giving away too much. Walk out there into your backyard because you've got a beautiful big property and grabbing the bark and grabbing the water and then doing the dyeing process with a beautiful hemp shirt. But it's not like it's something from the 18th century shirt. It's a modern shirt that you can then wear tomorrow when it dries.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's beautiful. Yeah. I always tell the moms, hey, your kids are going to get dirty, and then you can go and dye it, pick a color, go have fun, go foraging, it could be a fun art. Yeah.
Exactly. But I know you've talked a bit about it, but what actually got you into focusing on sustainable practices in your design? Like, why did you decide to really innovate in this area?
Well, like I started to say, is that when I got into it when I was young, I was designing for a lot of bands out of Nashville, Tennessee. So, everybody wanted me to be in their band. I said, no way, but I'll dress you. And then I started designing, making the clothes, and that's when I learned very quickly how dirty it was. So I was, I had that epiphany where I got to figure out different solutions. So when I first began designing, creating is when I started this path. It wasn't like I converted later. So that was 22 years ago. And so, for example, I worked with an outfit out of Atlanta, Georgia called Wilflex Ink and tried to create an organic pigment ink for printing on band t-shirts. And then I went to the only place I knew that could potentially do hemp in the US in LA. And I went to them and said, hey guys, you want to do hemp? They're like, no, Jeff, nobody will buy it. I'm like, okay, what if I give you a 50,000, order for band t-shirts? They're like, okay, yeah, we'll do whatever you want. We'll make it out of seaweed. We don't care. I'm like, okay, cool. So I started engaging and trying to use leveraging the buying power with producing natural fibers. And now it's a different day. Now, and thank goodness they did it because now they're like, thank you, Jeff, because they were like one of the top suppliers here in LA. And now there's other companies that are well versed in and bringing back what used to be so plentiful. Hemp
Mm.
and organic cotton used to be so plentiful here, at least in the U.S. and other countries, and obviously we got that fabric got bastardized and the machinery got taken apart and sent away. So that's why it's so important to bring back this idea of natural fibers and the buying power and people to really address that because that's the only way we'll come close to the price point of the synthetics because hemp, for example, grows in 3 months. It's non, you don't have, the water usage is not there. No pesticides are needed. It's actually a very easy crop to grow. It can grow anywhere. So that's why I see it as a big solution because a lot of people argue like, well, you're using up farmland for food. I'm like, no, hemp could grow anywhere. There's all these rebuttals, and it's
Mm.
basically coming from the PR from synthetic fabric guys. Like they just want to keep their hands in the pie, because it's a money game. So that's but I'm focused on the health of consumers, and obviously they're not. So that's why it's disruptive because we're disrupting a money industry. This doesn't even want to look at this, doesn't want to recognize it, doesn't want to give it any type of, um, if they give it any type of attention, then they're going to basically say, "Oh, wow, our fabric that we made in a laboratory out of all these toxic synthetic ingredients, maybe they're not good to put on the body." And then it kind of it will disassimilate that whole system. But it's a battle because, and then the argument is, well, we can't buy T-shirts, Jeff, for $7 anymore. And I'm like, well, you should be able to because if you look at homes and coffee, petrol, everything's gone up. It's just the normal thing of life. I'm buying $6 coffees versus $1.50, $2 when I, was young. It's just you always hear old people talk about that. When I bought that Coke, 25 cents, So that's the natural progression, but t-shirts are still the same from the 70s. We bought $7 t-shirts in the 70s. So what's happening is we're using cheap ingredients that are harming both the people making those t-shirts and the people wearing them. So that's what I'm trying to change and shift. It's like we should disband that and not allow those chemicals in that process. And so then we're using real fabric, hemp, and then we're using plant dyes, and they're going to be more expensive because there's more handwork. And then we're paying $35 for a t-shirt, but that should be, if you did the math, that should be the normal price for a t-shirt in 2025.
Mm.
So that's where I'm trying to like educate everyone because that's kind of the first thing they go to is like, oh yeah, that's for the wealthy people. Like, no, 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 it's for the healthy people. And in the long run, these fabrics that I'm talking about have a higher tensile strength. They don't get holes. They last longer. I ride horses in my Joper pants out of hemp for 14 years, and I wear them hard. Like, I travel in them, ride horses every day in them. So, that's what I'm trying to open everybody's mind to. There is a different solution in a different way.
I think one of the key things I pulled out of that is the health angle because I listened to one of your other segments that you did, and do you want to talk about the skin and the difference between the stomach?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, so the beginning of this narrative is first everyone needs to understand that we were designed to be nude and naked. Forget my Tennessee slang, naked. Um, but that's just the beautiful design of the body. And I've did advanced biology. I love the design of the body. It's amazing. So if you think about your food, the intake you have, and you have obviously your esophagus, you have your stomach acid, you got your liver, you got your kidneys, you got protection organisms to take care of anything that could come into your food intake that could be poisonous to your body or not good for you. Now, the skin is not lined with anything. It's made to breathe. It's made to take things in. You can test that with like nicotine patches or whatever, hormone patches. We know there's absorption there, but we have again a disconnect that these fabrics we cover our bodies with were never supposed to be there, and so there's this 37% on an average absorption rate. So whatever chemical that's in that shirt is going to go through your hair follicles and through your epidermis into your bloodstream. And that's just known as peer reviewed and that's been proven, but nobody's talking about the synergy, right? So one thing people don't realize, well, clothes do off gas. The industry spins it and says, oh, you can wash out the chemicals. I'm like, no, I mean, they do shed, but they're made to stay in. Otherwise, the dyes would bleed. So that's a lie. So the chemicals are in the shirt. They stay in the shirt for the life of the shirt. and they do go into, the epidermis through your skin. And so that just opens the mind to like, oh, wow, now I need to pay attention because what goes on your body goes in your body. And it's so easy to think about feeding yourself going into your body. So that's how I look at the body as a design. And that should blow everyone's mind at that point. Yeah.
I 100% agree. And I think that's something that's been lacking in the fashion. That's where sustainable, what you've been doing in the fashion industry makes such a difference because it's not looking at it just as a gorgeous piece of clothing that is tailored and fits. It is what harm could this clothing potentially do and mitigating and minimizing it by looking at natural sources for it. And that's where I found what you're doing is beyond just sustainable. It's looking at the impacts on the body as well with what is being used. And I was actually, I can't believe one of the things that I was listening to, as you can hear, I did do some research. But in regards to green, correct me if I'm wrong,
Oh,
but is arsenic was in
color
it?
dye, arsenic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they still use it. It's crazy. I'm like, wow, they're still using bits of arsenic in those dyes. Yeah, so that's why I went back in history because think about there's a time in London and Paris in which they were the fashion capitals, and they were also producing down the street. So you had like, it's kind of like the old muse houses. You had the horses in the back of the big houses, right? You had production right behind the shops.
Mm.
And so what you could do is create this synergy of effect. So say they had a big ball, you know, and they were making all the gowns for the ball and all the new colors of the fashion. Well, the next day, all those workers would be in the free hospital, sick, burns on their skin, all that stuff. So there was a friend of mine, Allison Matthews Davis. She went and did a 10-year study. She's in Toronto, and went back and went to the medical records, all the museums, etc., and basically put together and curated this beautiful book, and talks about all the toxicity back in that time. So I love telling some of the stories, and then I had some of our stories too that I just knew from history, and we put that together to kind of showcase this has been going on for a while since synthetics were created. And here we see it firsthand how it affects people. Now we don't talk about that or see it because it's done in, you know, third world countries, or it's done in places like, that we just don't, Western world doesn't travel to or hear about. And those countries don't really talk about it because they want to continue those contracts and the production, and they don't have the regulations that we do. So, it's like, how do we get people to care about it? Well, we focus in on their own health and not about like some pile of stockpile of clothing or chemicals at the Pearl River in China, for example, or somewhere else. We get them to care about themselves and their body, and then that will be part of the solution is clean. If we clean that up, then we'll clean up the manufacturing. And that's
Mm.
why I'm kind of focused on that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that countries like certain first world countries have regulations on certain types of toxins and dyes to a certain point, but they don't have one when it comes to importing. And I think that's one of the biggest loopholes that I've learned that a lot of companies are getting around. And again, then you've got the impact on the workers and the country and everything else. And it's just this vicious
Yeah.
cycle.
It's a vicious, vicious cycle. Yeah. And you'll find even the regulations that do exist aren't upheld, and they're very open-ended, meaning like a lot of them are saying, oh, a certain amount of ppms are allowed in the garment. But if you talk to any scientist or chemist, they'll say, well, it's not about the amount of ppms in a product. It could be lesser ppms and it has a greater effect because it's a synergy of the chemistry, right, that
Mm.
creates the causation. So there's a lot more to it. So, like for example, any carcinogens like formaldehyde, etc., that are in all these synthetic dyed pieces, they're trying to say, oh, it's up to 100 ppm allowment, but legally, but they're going to start coming down off of that. But in our research, 10 ppms could give you cancer. So
Mm.
it's like, but there's so many variables to it, you can't pinpoint and say that. But we do know formaldehyde is carcinogenic. It does cause cells to mutate into cancerous cells. Um, so you're playing Russian roulette with it by wearing it. Because one day you can be fine, next day you're in the sun, alpha gassing goes in your system, and you got it. Because obviously when your body bioaccumulates this stuff, it eventually acts out. So whether it's a rash, whether it's a disease, or whether it's cancer.
Mm,
So we're trying to get people to get rid of this stuff so that the bioaccumulation stays low and you
mm,
can tolerate it, because your body is designed again to move these toxins out if we allow it. But if we're clothed all day in this stuff, then we go to bed at night and sleep in this stuff, we don't give our bodies a break. And we're surrounded by environmental toxins, as we know about. And people have heard about the food toxins. And, so that's part of it. But I think the bigger picture is clothing. Why? Because we're wearing it all day long. So it's constant absorption. And that's not being talked about or looked at. And I'm like, wow, that's the biggest part of the puzzle in my mind. So why aren't we? And anyways, that's why I'm so hardcore about this. And the film is a great medium to get this out.
I completely agree. And I think part of it is I'm going to ask you this question is what role do you think cultural identity, cultural shifts have in consumer behavior to drive demand to shift?
So it's twofold. Everyone says, well, here, I'll start with this. We have enough clothing produced today to clothe all of us on planet Earth, and with the population growth until 2050 at least. Um, so that we do know based on the calculation. Now, so we don't need new clothes, bottom line. But I think, we're dealing with, it's interesting because, food, shelter, clothes, those are our three needs. So clothes now is an extra, it's a fashion thing. We have huge closets, right? We're not down to six outfits in a little trunk. And now we consume a lot more. So we do need to slow down in our purchasing and our buying. Instead of an emotional purchasing, we need to think through and consciously choose what's healthy for our bodies. And something that will last forever. So, but here's the so, and again, I'm not against capitalism, but the capitalistic, you know, design is to keep driving people back into stores. So they basically, in design schools, what I've taught at, they teach design obsolescence, which basically means they teach young designers how to design things that fall apart. So whether it's the way you sew something up, whether it's the hardware, or whether it's the fabric, or people don't understand. Like, most people know the Last Supper, like it's eating itself away. So these fabrics that are dyed synthetically, actually the synthetic dyes do that to the fabrics. So the tensile strength weakens over time. Especially detergents that strip away the fabrics, they also weaken the fabrics. So these fabric, they're not going to last long. So you basically, um, you get to a point where you gotta shift your buying focus into what do I need in my wardrobe? Get rid of the things that are toxic, replace them with things that will last forever. And then I think we're in a good spot. But if we're going to emotionally keep purchasing, then that's not going to change things, because then we're wanting things for very, very cheap so we can buy more. It's like the shelf syndrome. So we have to kind of, it's almost not reteach ourselves, and awareness is half of it. I think we're struggling with an addiction crisis. So I think we've been so marketed to and pushed and to make this money and then spend it. So, and that just drives it, and that convenience factor, Amazon delivering it to us, like it kind of feels good for a minute. And that is a true, and there's studies on this. And the marketers and the PR companies of these companies know this. So they feed on our addictions to want new things and to wear new things and to feel good about it. And I don't want to take that away from anyone, but how cool would it be if you came to me and said, I need a new dress for this year for my parties and cocktail dress. And we come up with the fabric and we dye it, and you pick your colors, and then, hey, maybe we do a long one and then we lift it and do another skirt, and then we re-dye it, and it becomes two dresses for the year. And that's your dress. Nobody else will ever have it. To me, that is a lot more, powerful than buying something off the rack that you're just gonna toss or not wear again. And I don't know how we shift that other than, hope that some change makers, some influencers will take that path and then talk about it and kind of show a different way.
And I do believe that in this age, influencers have a lot to do here, that
Yeah.
they need to talk more and not just, if I use an example of one of the fashion models that you've had, wear your clothes, not just wear it once, live and breathe it. Like I know you wear your own clothing all the time, every day, day in, day out, whenever you're not naked. But uh, hey, had to throw that in, right?
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of that too. Yeah.
but why are they only doing it that one night for those number of hours? They those people that can influence, because that's literally what the word is, why aren't they doing it more often to help shift this movement too? Because that will help and reduce a lot of this fast fashion as well. Like one, you
Yeah.
go.
No, I was just gonna say, when you talk about character, think about it like back in the day, and again, I'm kind of a living example, but you would see me walking down the street in London or Sydney or whatever, and I'd have my frock coat on, and it'd be blowing the wind, it'd be that navy silk that I wear all the time. You'll see it in all the pictures. Like, oh, there goes Jeff. You just know me from my overcoat. I don't change it every night. I could use that same overcoat and it becomes a part of who you are. And it's worn and tethered, and I've ridden horses in it, so the shoulders are ripping from it, jerking and jumping. And it's like, oh, Jeff's patched his shoulder. Like that's him. It's not fake, it's a real character piece. And I think we suffer because we don't have those character pieces anymore. Something that,
Mm.
that we had all these memories and, that we wore. So
That comfy
I
piece of clothing that just gives you warmth.
yeah, yeah, I think we're disconnected, and I think if we wore our outfits more, we have more memories, and it would actually, it'd be a whole new kind of paradigm shift of character, and that's who we are. And it's okay to shift and change that or add new pieces throughout the years, but finding who you are and having fashion be a part of that journey and that creative journey and doing it yourself and picking your colors and working with a designer because there's a lot of guys like me that are you could find in Sydney, you find in your hometown. There are people making clothes that need the work, and that's the
Mm.
reality. So we could really go back to that village mentality instead of buying from these big stores that could make these clothes for people, you know.
And that is definitely something that I've seen shifting, where people are starting to go more local. If we go back to the three core things people need: food, shelter, and clothing. Food, farmers markets and everything have
Yeah.
started to really gain popularity, where people go there not just for a morning out, but to actually get their produce for the week, knowing where it's come from is hopefully sustainable, fresh. You're buying it from hopefully the grower themselves as well in a lot of these cases. And I
Exactly.
think
Yeah,
that isn't a movement that is sustainable practice. People have
it is. Yeah.
shifted because they don't want to buy from these big Walmarts, Woolworths, or whatever they're called. And
Yeah.
that's where I think it's starting. And then the next is going to be, I'm hoping, the whole clothing piece, because shelter, let's face it, it's going to be very hard to do that in shelter, apart from the what's used for building. And I have to say, I've actually taken some of these practices when I built my home where I could. But I think the next frontier is going to be clothing, because that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, unless you lived in a tent, I lived in a Sibley in a canvas tent for a year, and I obviously built that, and it was great. So, it can be done, but that's an extreme viewpoint. But to your point, yeah, we definitely the farmers market are a great example. You could have artisans come together with their clothing and those items and underwear and bras and etc. and show up in a market and people could buy from them. And that's
Mm.
what we're hoping this film will drive is that, because they need the market. Their voices aren't being heard at all because these companies have huge marketing dollars and PR. I mean, there's no way to compete. I've been in the mainstream world for a long time in fashion, and still people don't know what I do. 22 years, and I've been speaking the same message. So it just shows you how powerful that industry is, and how much money they make. And so, but yeah, it could start. That's why it has to be grassroots, and that's why I'm hoping this film will ignite because, yeah, Sunday in Sydney, there could be a whole crafts market of clothing, and it's cool. I've shown in Sydney. I know there's makers there, and it'd be amazing.
No, I completely agree. And I think a lot of this comes down to consumers actually understanding what the supply chain is. So I would love to understand. I have a little bit of understanding, but I think everyone else would love to hear how have you started that journey to ensure a transparent supply chain of what you do?
Sure. I mean, when I started, it was a different day, and so I went and visited everyone, knew everyone by name, helped create fabrics, and I was figuring out my dyes, my plant dyes, and working with other artisans. And it was a way where it's a community, and we were sharing ideas and trying to create new things, and it was a different day. So I've been doing it a long time, but for anybody starting new in this, you really have to go to the source and just ask those questions. And a perfect example is I have a buddy in Germany who is in the health industry, but he lost his mom also to breast cancer. And so he started a sheet company, and it was just trusting the manufacturer in India to give him organic cotton. And they did, but they did an additive on it for, basically it helps block stains. It's a waterproofing agent because cotton holds water, so it can mildew, basically. Industry standard. They all do it. Didn't think anything about it. So he sent me the sheets saying, "Hey, look at this. This is amazing, and this is fits your ethos." And I said, I touched it, and I was like, "Oh no."
You
I
can
knew
feel it. Yeah.
I could feel it immediately. And then I did my own testing on it, and sure enough, it had, the PFABs in it from that waterproofing agent from the additive. And he was heartbroken. And I was like, buddy, you can't believe it. You have to test it yourself.
Independent laboratory testing.
And
Yes.
exactly. And it's expensive and it's an extra step, but that's where we are now because you can't trust the transparency of these textilers because they just want to sell stuff and it's industry standard. It's like, no, please don't. It's like when I go to a coffee shop and it's like, no, no, please don't put it in that to-go cup. And they're like, why? They look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, did you guys know it's lined with PFABs? And they're like, some of them are like, what's PFABs? And others like, you're crazy. I'm like, okay, why do you think the liquid doesn't leak through the cup? It's cardboard, it's paper.
That's why you
It's like,
can't put in recycling. It
yeah,
has to go into the rubbish because of that
yeah,
lining.
yeah, because of the lining. I go, and that hot liquid hits that, goes into my coffee, and I'm drinking that. No, that's a lot. That's a liability. Like, no. And then I get them to remake it, and they hate me. I say, listen, I'll pay you to remake it, but I'm not putting that in my body.
Mm.
But it's interesting. So it's against kind of the normality, and that's why it's hard in production. So you really have to stay on it as a designer and creative. Think of it like a chef. You just have to know where your food comes from. You have to know where fabric comes from. You have to know about, you have to basically do your own dyes or don't dye right now because commercially they're not available. Anybody who says otherwise are just, this is greenwashing.
Or test it and figure out if they're lying to you.
Yeah, yeah, but right now the commercial market, there's no solutions as of yet. We've been working on it, but it's a hard one to crack. But I'm hopeful. There are some things coming, pending, but I think you can do plant-based to a certain degree of production. You can definitely do it. But again, it's kind of a seesaw. We got to bring down the consumption, and then we can meet it with the plant dyes, right? And then it all works out. But right now, I'll tell everyone just to buy undyed.
Mm. Yeah, that makes definitely more sense, particularly if you don't have your own expensive budget put aside to check your clothing or sheets or whatever it is to see if they've done something that you didn't
Yeah.
want done with it.
Yeah, just so your audience knows, it's about 1,500 to 2,500 per garment to test, and that's only in 3 or 4 chemicals.
Mm.
And we only know about like 80 of them, and there's about 8,000 used in production. And you have to call them out. So it's not like there's not like some general test that says, oh, this is in it. You have to say, hey, can you check this sheet for formaldehyde or PFABs and you have to give them
Yeah.
specific, and then they give you a report, and that's how it works, you know. But that's a scary bit. So even as a consumer, you don't really have that option, you know.
No, no, definitely not. But looking ahead for you and ethical fashion and sustainability. What is your vision? What are you wanting to see that comes in your near and long future for what you're
I
working on?
always say I can't wait to the day where, that guy's walking down the street in polyester shirt and everyone's like, "Can you believe it?" And they like get out of his way because it's off gassing. Like, can't wait. Or they put a sign on the gym door and say, "No synthetics allowed." It's like saying no smoking allowed. And I
Yep.
tell everyone, like being in the gym, wearing that stuff is basically like smoking and working out at the same time. The amount of
Mm.
chemicals you're putting into your body that's trying to breathe, that's trying to be healthy and trying to off gas, and you're putting the toxins back in by wearing it. And not to
Oh,
mention the detergents that they use, and you can smell it when people are sweating. I can smell like, oh, she washes her clothes in Tide, he's washing his clothes in Gain, and like it gives me a headache immediately. And
mm.
it's funny. It's not funny, but it's like every gym I go to, and I work out my hemp stuff, and everyone's kind of laughing at me. And I don't wear tennis shoes because they're made of crap, and so I'm wearing my like leather boots that I hand make and all that stuff to keep everything clean. And anyways, it's funny. They're like, Jeff's kind of weird. Like, I think I'm the normal one, but
Well, the
but
thing
no,
is,
no.
everything that you wear, like to say the tennis shoes, for example, they're mass produced. They're not for your feet. You're wearing shoes that fit you and are comfortable and will probably make you run a lot longer than someone wearing a pair of tennis shoes that aren't made for them.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, everyone. It's like bodies. I've dressed over 6,000 bodies. Every single, and I tell this to women, every single woman's body is different. Torso length to their breast, their under bust, their to, shoulders, their arm length. Like no one's the same. So I don't understand why they're wearing these garments that are box fit. And
Mm,
like it's like no way. And people are surprised when my dresses can fit like different size and body types because I just know the way I do the construction. It's interesting, but it can be done. It just has to be done in a smarter way. Um, and and I want to say, I did find hemp tennis shoes from Converse, believe it or not. And I was like, huh, that's pretty good. I like that. So they're playing around with it, the idea.
mm,
But yeah, but think about your feet. They're at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. They're gonna off gas and get rid of those toxins through your feet, which a lot of people, it's more so women that have done the extraction and you get that black, where when they get a pedicure
yep.
or something, and you really understand, like, oh wow. So socks are another one because I couldn't find any socks without nylon. So I created
Mm.
my friend has a paca farm in Italy, so we pulled from her pacas, which are awesome. They're like my little buddies. Um,
I want to go
75.
hug them. They're
I
gorgeous
know they're
creatures.
they're amazing. Like they congregate. So they all. I know it sounds weird, but I'm obviously an animal trainer lover. But they congregate. So they use the restroom in one place, one area. Sheep go
Clean.
everywhere. You got to walk, know where you walk. They go to one place. They don't want to dirty their pen up. It's great.
Yep.
It's brilliant.
Very clean.
Very clean, and they're sweet, and they're easy caretakers. They don't test your fence. I mean, they're amazing. Anyways, alpaca, I love it because moths don't touch it. Super breathable. So we do 75% alpaca, 25% wool, and I'm going to do a mix of 75% alpaca and 25% hemp. So like
Mm.
a summer and winter sock. And I love it because that's one of the areas which was missing. So we're going to put the socks online next week, but I do have men's and women's hemp boxers because again, it was another category which I couldn't turn anybody onto. I couldn't say, "Hey, go buy these," or go.
Mm.
Everyone was coming back, and it was all mixed with stuff, and all the waistbands had polyester waistbands. So I do organic cotton, natural rubber with the waistband on ours. And anyways, so yeah, there's a lot of details to it, and that's why the industry doesn't want to switch because it would create a higher price point for them, and they wouldn't have their margins.
Yeah.
And again, they're making way too much money. It's ridiculous, their margins, and they could definitely shift and change things. I don't really have empathy for that because, and some of them should go out of business. But and then what would happen is we would create greener, more sustainable fashion companies that have this in their consciousness and they would do it differently
Mm.
and still be able to turn a profit. And we put people at the forefront, your consumer, then that's how a company should be built, I think.
I agree. I completely agree. And I just think it's people who help the company. So why aren't you investing in the people?
Yeah. It's because it's usually one or two or a whole 10, I don't know. The guys at the top that make those decisions and based on numbers. But then I'm like, guys, you all have wives, you all have daughters. Like, why aren't you thinking about this? Like, should you not
Exactly.
be changing this tomorrow if you could?
Yep.
But and every company's set up differently. And I met with a company in the U.S. And I'll just say they're happy to say it's Jockey Underwear, family owned. And I talked to them about converting and changing stuff, and they were listening, and they're family owned, so it'd be an easy switch. But again, the CEO, who's a friend and from Tennessee, actually said, Jeff, I'm responsible for all these people's jobs and everything, and we're too scared to do it because if
Yeah.
we switch over and nobody else does, we're left with a higher price point hanging out there, and we'll go under. And so so all that to say is that they're waiting on the market to change and demand. So that's why
Yeah.
this is so important. And for everyone watching it and to share it is so important because we have to get majority of people in the world to understand this and to want it and to drive it. And then we can honestly change it. Um,
Mm.
and we can't just let it sit idle, and it can't be the 5% who are conscious about this. We need it to be everyone on board. Otherwise those big guys won't even try. So there are guys out there that want to do it. They're trying to be smart about the changing it over.
Exactly. And I think that that's the important piece is change is inevitable. And now it's about the people demanding, and then change can happen.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
think you,
also showing it can be done. And I look at like
mm,
it's like the electric car. Once a company showed that they could do it and they could get it out there and they could present it in an affordable price point and that they worked, then the rest of the car manufacturers jumped on board because they knew it was a way forward. But you can expect one of them to do it first because they didn't want to take the learning curve and the costs with that, et cetera. So I get that. I come from a production background. I understand the dynamics there, but that's why, yeah, this time is so, so important because I don't know if I have another one left in me. So, so I put everything into this. I mean, heart, soul, financial, everything, all my attention. And,
mm,
I don't know if I could do another round. And a lot of my friends that I started with in this world, they've moved on, sad because they couldn't get a market, they couldn't stay in business. So yeah, so I feel like I'm that. I don't know if you ever saw Mel Gibson in The Patriot, but like it was a cool scene where like they were losing and the English was advancing, and he looked around, the flag fallen. He picked up the flag and just started running forward. Everyone else is retreating, and just that visual imagery of the flag moving forward. They
mm.
did, people are like they don't know what to believe. They're scattered, but they see that imagery going forward, and they're like, oh, maybe we should be running forward, not that way. And they turned and they won because of that one, instant where he said, I'm just going to run forward with the flag. So that's what I'm trying to do is keep it running forward, despite all odds. And it's been a hard journey for sure.
I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I love it. I cannot wait to see it turn into mass because it will
Thank you.
happen for you where the masses will come to you and you'll be leading this and you'll be the expert that everyone will come to. So I'm waiting for that day and it won't be too far away at all. So I know the documentary Let Them Be Naked is going to help you along that journey. And I can't wait to see the next documentary and everything that comes after it.
I know. Yeah, I can't think about that right now, but yeah, I mean, we literally did this in a year, and everyone's like, "How did you?" I'm like, "Guys, I built a collection in 3 months. Like, why would I spend, 2 or 3 years on a doc? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
My mind wouldn't allow me to spend that much time on one thing. But yeah, so yeah, so we'll see. But yeah, but thank you for your support and encouragement, and yeah, so we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, I have a question I ask every guest,
Sure.
and you were pre warned.
Okay.
So, what brand, any brand in the world, best represents you and why? And you can cheat.
Best brand?
Brand.
Like when you say brand, what does that mean? Sorry. Like,
So I'll just use some names that come to mind. I'm just looking around. So Tiffany, Nike, Adidas, Woolworths, a brand. So what
okay.
brand, Patagonia, all different brands, what brand in the world, and you can cheat and use your own, best
Okay.
represents you and why?
I would say Land Rover
Ooh,
because I'm basically like an old tractor that's still running and some reason, but still fashionable.
I
So
like it.
yeah.
I like it.
And
And you
and
travel a
it's
lot
good.
too.
I travel a lot and it's good for off-roading because
Yeah.
I'm pretty much off-road most of the time in my life and used for equestrian horses as well. So yeah, I'm kind of a mix of all that, you
I
know.
like it. I like it a lot. Is there anything else you would like to add before I do my wrap up?
No, I hope you guys get a chance to see the doc this weekend at thebenaked.com and it's going till midnight on Mother's Night. That's my gift to everyone because I didn't want to wait till a streamer picked it up. I wanted to get this info out there and get everyone, empowered to make different decisions tomorrow. So yeah, so enjoy it, I hope.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'll make sure that it's included in the show notes. Now,
Perfect.
for me, what I've learnt today, and people that have listened to my podcast know that I love to talk about sustainable practices, other ways that we can do things. And I was so fortunate to come across Jeff because Jeff lives and breathes this in an industry that needs it most. So for me, my key learnings out of today were not knowing what my clothing is actually made out of. And like, yes, you can read the label and it says cotton, polyester, nylon, whatever. But I'm going down to the actual chemicals and dyes within it, like the waterproofing, for example, or the color agents. And for me, that was a huge eye opener because I assumed that my country would protect me with all its regulations. I know it does it for skincare products. Why isn't it and that's on my skin. Why isn't it doing it for my clothing? So for me, that was a real eye opener about there is a gap that needs to be identified, but how can I control that? So listening to Jeff and everything that he does, I can help control this narrative with what I purchase. So I can actually look at these tags and go, what is it made out of? If if I well, let's face it, I do like to wear a lot of black. But hey, if I wanted to, he's laughing at me, by the way, everyone. But for
Hmm.
me, it could be about the product, what it's made out of, the actual garment fabric, shifting that from the leggings through something that's linen or something that is hemp, that is breathable. Doing those small changes will help me and my health, and that will help you too. And it comes down to the challenge that's out there at the moment, where you've got big companies that are still owning these markets and they're dictating with fast fashion trends. There is so much that we can do ourselves with our own voice, and that is where do we spend our money? And the learning for me was that, as I assumed, a lot of clothing is actually created to, I suppose, break down quicker than you think. So things that we bought probably 20, 30 years ago, like our denim jeans or a really nice t-shirt or even jacket, lasted a hell of a lot longer than anything we're buying today. And that's because the companies are designing it that way. So wouldn't it be better and more cost effective then to go to someone to create it for you and then it fits you, is unique to you? Yes, it will cost a little bit more today, but over time, it'll actually be cheaper because it's going to last a hell of a lot longer and you're going to get a lot more use. And as Jeff mentioned, you could make memories out of it. It could be that coat like Jeff has that he's synonymously recognized with, or it could be a really comfy pair of jeans in a different fabric, of course, or whatever fabric you love that are just your go-to all the time and they last for such a long time because of how they've been made. Plus, more than likely, you're going to someone local, so you're keeping things within the community, just like the example I gave of the farmers market, bringing it back into local community and helping those around you, but also getting something out of it yourself, which is an amazing garment made for you, unique for you. And you could actually be part of the design process too if you wanted. Like, imagine picking out your own colors. That's pretty cool. to be able to do that, or to reuse a dress or a skirt or something and dye it a new color. There's nothing wrong with that. And we shouldn't feel anything except for joy when we're wearing our clothes. Now, the other thing I took away was there is a huge disconnect with us and clothing. We're just fast fashion. We're addicted to shopping. We love that instant purchase. But unless it's most of the time we get invites in at least 1-2 weeks, we get time. Or we know we're going to need a new wardrobe because of a new season coming up, because we destroyed the last one because we don't have children, or if we're lucky we horse ride or whatever it might be. But why don't we stop and think before we actually purchase? We make an informed decision. There's no need to rush and spend our money because the marketers are telling us to do that. Now, I am a marketer, I can say that. But it's more about taking time to actually decide what you need, but what is it made out of? Be curious, ask questions. There's nothing wrong with being curious and asking what color dye is within these clothing. They should be able to answer that to you. And if they can't, that's a bit of a worry for all of us, isn't it? Because what are they then hiding? Where is it coming from? And then what's behind the scenes of that too? We all remember the uproar that Nike went through when child labor was brought about to everyone. We found out where they were being made and how much they were paying. And that changed a movement for where it was being made and the payments and the conditions. Why aren't we also questioning about the dyes and the toxins in our clothing? Because imagine those humans that are making them as well and what they're going through. So they're my final thoughts. Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Your summary was beautiful and poetic and amazing. So thank you again.
Thank you again, Jeff. Now, for everyone else, don't forget, letthembeenaked.com is where you're able to actually watch this fabulous documentary. I'll be having it on the show notes as well, so you can click through there. It is going to be a fantastic learning experience for all of us, and really go down to our hearts to be able to help us be able to help not just ourselves with our health, but also those around us too, and really open our eyes to an industry that we probably haven't had that opportunity to see before, and from an expert who's been living and breathing it too. Now, everyone else, don't forget to add more to marketing to your playlist so you don't miss out on future fabulous guests. More to marketing.